Good morning, and welcome to the webinar for the newest release of GeoStudio, GeoStudio 8.3. My name is Brandon Griffin. I'm here with my colleague Justin Richmond. We're both software engineers on the GeoStudio team, and we're going to be taking you on a tour of what is new and improved with GeoStudio 8.3. Before we dive in, let me take an opportunity to introduce DiSTI for those watching who may be unfamiliar. So we've been around for just over 30 years now, having been established in 1994. The first version of GeoStudio actually released originally back in 2000 as a tool for developing photorealistic cockpit trainers. So at this point, we have over 20 years of experience in HMI and UI solutions, in simulation, embedded, and safety critical. To give you an idea of how widely we're used, here are just a few of our customers in industries ranging everywhere from aerospace and defense to automotive, medical, trains, agriculture, and more. So here you just have some of those different customers we've worked with. GeoStudio is actually widely used in production of both embedded and safety critical embedded applications. At Hyundai Motus, GeoStudio is used in a wide variety of different HUDs, clusters, and IVIs. Jaguar Land Rover standardized on GeoStudio for 9 years for the in-vehicle infotainment across all other vehicles. And on the safety critical side, we're used in a variety of aircraft, including the simulators for those aircraft. So here are some examples of the different GeoStudio production that we've had. Furthermore, we collaborate regularly with our partners, as no production system is built in isolation. We partner across disciplines, including with OS and RTOSs, hardware, graphics drivers, and user software. And here are some of our major partners that we've worked with over the years. So you can see we've worked with quite a few. Now let's jump into GeoStudio 8.3. With GeoStudio 8.3, we're providing a number of improvements and bug fixes, as well as some great new features. We've improved GeoStudio's integration with various IDEs. The GeoStudio log has been updated with some great improvements. We've brought support for Angle to Linux and Mac OS. And we've also introduced the ability to copy objects and code elements between GeoStudio instances. First, we'll take a look at GeoStudio's tighter IDE integration. And as we're going through this presentation, feel free to leave questions in the Q&A section. I believe the button is up in the top right of the window, and we'll be able to answer those for you towards the end. So while GeoStudio already could be utilized in tandem with IDEs such as Visual Studio, GeoStudio 8.3 introduces some great improvements to that integration. Namely, GeoStudio now supports external IDE linking with Visual Studio, VS Code, and Xcode, depending on the platform. Additionally, internal linking is also now supported. What this really means is that when an error from user-generated editor code is output to the log, the error can be clicked to jump to the offending line of code in the GeoStudio code editor. Alternatively, clicking an error resulting from an external source file will open the corresponding IDE for the current platform to the offending line of code. These improvements will make tracking down and resolving code issues much more efficient. So let's go ahead and jump over to GeoStudio 8.3 and take a look at this integration in action. So here we have the GeoStudio 8.3 editor, and we have a project opened up here. And so what we'll go ahead and do is try and build the project, which will result in some errors in the log, since we have some syntax errors already in place for this. So to build, we can go up here and click the build button. It's going to try generating that C++ source and header file pair for this GLS file. And we see there are a couple of errors. So now with GeoStudio 8.3, you can simply click on these errors in the log and it will take you to the code causing issues. So let's go ahead and click this bottom error, which is telling us there's a syntax error, missing a semicolon. And so if you watch over here in the code editor, as I click this error, it's going to jump me right to where that error is coming from. And as we can see here, we're trying to do a dynamic scale call on our green ellipse object, and we're missing a semicolon. Um, Now I also mentioned that we have external IDE linking. So what that means is if we click an error resulting from an external source file, it's going to open up the IDE that is associated with the platform that you're currently on. So if we look at this second error here, uh, this one is coming from our external implementations CPP file. And so what we can do is simply click on this error, and it's going to open up Visual Studio. And it's going to take us right to the line of code where we are seeing that error. So in this case, we're trying to call the string property on a text box, but of course we've misspelled string. So we'll take a look at fixing these errors and running, but first I want to take us back to our presentation, and we're going to take a look at another new feature of GeoStudio 8.3 that kind of goes along with this one. That being a set of log improvements that we've introduced with GeoStudio 8.3. So what we've really focused on in improving the log is improving its readability and navigability. With that, the GeoStudio log now has additional filtering capabilities that make it easier to traverse. The display of info messages, warning messages, and errors can be individually toggled. These filter buttons synergize really well with the tighter IDE integration to make it easier than ever to resolve potential issues in your GeoStudio project. We can see these buttons here in this picture we have of a log, but let's go ahead and jump back over to GeoStudio and take a look at these in action. So we can see right now in the log, we have some errors and we also have a bunch of info messages. But let's say that I only care about our errors. I can deselect the show warnings in log and show info in log. So I'll click those, and now we'll see only the errors in the log. Alternatively, we could, for instance, only show info messages. So now we're not seeing those errors. Um, but let's go ahead and show all of them. And so with these errors that we have, let's go ahead and address those really quick. So this first one, of course, we're missing the semicolon. And if we go back to Visual Studio, we can fix this string call. And now when we try and build, We should not get any error messages, which is indeed the case. And then, of course, we can run the application. So just a simple little demo application here where we're doing a dynamic scale on our ellipse and also setting our text readout here to hello, as you can see is text by default. So we're hoping these new features will make addressing potential code issues in your project easier than ever to fix. Next, we're going to take a look at Angle on Linux and Mac OS. For that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Justin Richmond. And just as a reminder, feel free to leave questions in the Q&A section, and we'll address those as we're moving along.
Yep. Thank you, Brandon. So yep, we'll move on to Angle on Linux and macOS. So this was previously supported only on Windows. The GeoStudio Angle deployment is now available on Linux and macOS. For those not in the know, Angle is an open source cross-platform graphics engine abstraction layer developed by Google. In short, this allows the GeoStudio ES runtime to be translated to one of the hardware supported rendering APIs available for a particular platform. With that, we can utilize GeoStudio content in DirectX, Metal, or OpenGL 3.1 programs such as Unity and Unreal Engine. This improvement will allow for the GeoStudio Unity and Unreal Engine plugins to be expanded to Linux and macOS. And as part of GeoStudio 8.3 release, we actually do have the Mac OS Unity plugin prototype and available by request. So you can check it out on our doc site, docs.disti.com, or contact support, and that's support@disti.com if you're interested. And even beyond rendering in other applications, the Angle deployment is very powerful for prototyping ES applications on desktop. So you can see how they will look and run on desktop before deploying them to a target. So now you can do that on Linux and macOS, which is really neat. But let's actually get into a little demo here using Angle on macOS. So I have a display capture setup on a Mac here, and I do have a little project here. This is the altimeter from the cockpit tutorial. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So this project, what you would have to do is add the Angle deployment package to your project. And you can do that from the package manager. You can download the package directly from the doc site as well and get the package installed that way. So it's as simple as clicking a checkbox here and then downloading it and applying it to your project. So let's do that here real quick and get GeoStudio restarted. So now we have that new deployment in the project. So the Angle CMake deployment is now selectable from the deployment dropdown. And let's go ahead and build and run this project. So you'll see that quick prototyping of ES content on desktop. And while that's going, I can also bring up Unity here. So if you ever wanted to have GeoStudio content in Unity, it's usually popular for like simulator content, things like that, like a HUD maybe. But let's go ahead and access the package manager in Unity. So the GeoStudio Unity plugin is actually a Unity package and will ultimately deliver that to you. So let's go ahead and get that loaded into Unity here. So we'll send you the package and you'll have to apply this package.json to the package manager in Unity. And then I'll import all the assets. We have a variety of scripts to aid using the content in Unity. So let's get a little more set up here. Let's create a quad in Unity and let's get that script applied. And here is that altimeter running. This is from GeoStudio. So that's running. That built-in ran for quick prototyping. And let's see if that script is ready. Okay, looks like I may have to restart Unity here for that to load properly. So let's get that project back up and running. So yep, we have scripts to help with click events, keyboard events to aid in that and passing that data through RSO. Okay, so now that Unity's back up and running, let's take a look at the scripts here. Here are the different scripts. We have some examples. Here's the event handler. But to actually render the content, we'll use GLS Unity Core. And from here, let's go back to our project because we will need some assets here. So from our GeoStudio project, let's dive into our engineering deployments folder. This is where you'll find the Angle CMake build assets. So ultimately we'll need this dist folder, but let's create a spot for that in Unity here. So we're going to place that into the streaming assets folder in Unity. So let's go ahead and bring that over. And let's go back to the quad here and set the RSO path. So usually it'll be on Mac, it'll be lib GeoStudio GLS component.dylib. You can change that on with your project settings in GeoStudio if you ever need to. But we got that set up. Let me take another look at the scene from this default project so we can get a better view here once it runs. Okay, that should be good. So let's go ahead and run this in Unity. Okay, and there you have it. In just a few minutes, you can have GeoStudio content running in another application using Angle deployment. So here's the Altimeter running in Mac. Really neat, really useful. Cool. So back over here. Another powerful new feature that we have in GeoStudio 8.3 is the ability to copy geometry and code objects between instances of GeoStudio. So let me tell you a little more about that. While this was not previously possible in GeoStudio 8.3, we allow for objects to be copied from one open instance of GeoStudio to another. Associated fonts, materials, textures, and sounds are automatically transferred to the new instance when this is performed. This even extends to behaviors and packages. Both will be brought over with the same preferences and selections as in the original. Reusing work between projects is now easier than ever, further improving the already rapid workflow capabilities of GeoStudio. So let's go ahead and open GeoStudio here. I'll just do this one on my Windows machine. So let's go ahead and I'll make this smaller. Let's go ahead and get that same Altimeter project open. You can see that here. And I'll open another fresh empty project. So let's get that created. So we have two projects here, one blank and one full of information. And so now we can simply copy over, any kind of object from one project to another. So I just copied over that needle. It'll keep the positioning as well. This application has a bigger application window. So code objects are brought over. You can also bring over code. So copy, paste, copy, paste code assets. So here's the code here. Brought that over. So you can even do this with a wide variety of objects here as well. I'll go ahead and copy over basically all the assets, all the geometry from that project. So brought all of that over, and you can see that whole altimeter is here. Let me go back to the code browser. So even these associated object callbacks are brought over as well. I didn't bring over, or I should have brought this over. Okay. So all those are brought over, and can simply take things from one project to another and get new projects up and running quickly. Um, Reusing objects, so you don't have to reuse full pages. You can take bits and pieces. It's a lot easier. Let's see what happened here. Oh, something from one of the code items I copied over. Let me check the other. Yeah, so this is another piece of code, the parameter. I can copy that over as well. Okay. So let's get this building. And there we have it. Can copy and paste things over as easy as that. So let's continue here. In addition to the big new features we discussed, there are several improvements and bug fixes included with GeoStudio 8.3. While we won't go over every one of these, I do want to mention that a number of these improvements and bug fixes aim to increase the efficiency of working with catalyzers, the 3D canvas, and the code editor. So quite a few improvements and bug fixes in that area. Be sure to check out the full changelog, 8.3 changelog at our docs.disti.com site. There you can see the full list. This concludes our look at the new features introduced with GeoStudio 8.3, which was launched in January 2025. To reiterate some of the key features, we had tighter IDE integration, log improvements, Angle on Linux and macOS, and the copy objects and code elements between GeoStudio instances. So download your copy of GeoStudio 8.3 today. And again, if you have any questions, please post them in this webinar. There's a Q&A button. Again, thank you for joining us. And with that, we'll leave the floor open for questions.
Yep, and it looks like we do already have several questions. So I'll go ahead and start publishing these so we can answer them. First question is, if I have a GLS project in 8.2, how do I upgrade it to 8.3? So that should actually be a smooth process. You would simply open the 8.2 project in 8.3, and then it will prompt you to update the GLS file when you go to save. So GeoStudio will automatically update the GLS file to 8.3. If there are any packages that need to be updated to a new version, GeoStudio will also prompt you to download those updated versions, and then it should simply just work. Should be a very straightforward process. Also, there is, I think, a 20-second or so delay, so sorry if we take a moment to get to your question. Another question is, how do I install the angle deployment in my project? So the angle deployment, and actually all of our deployments, come in the form of packages. So you would simply go to the package manager and select the angle deployment. And I can actually show that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So back to our demo project we were looking at before. You can see right now we have desktop CMake and WebGL CMake deployments. To get Angle, we can go to the Manage Packages button here to open up the package manager. And then we'll see the angle CMake deployment. It's right here. Um, and when you go to install that, it's going to also automatically install the Angle GL Studio ES runtime, which is used by that deployment. So you do that, click apply, GL Studio will download the package, and the editor will prompt you to restart, and the package will be available. Okay, next question. Does IDE integration support all versions of Visual Studio? So the IDE integration will work with versions of Visual Studio that are currently supported by GL Studio. So I believe that is Visual Studio 15, 17, 19, and 22. Um, Made a comment, great job. I'm going to download the new version now. Yes, we hope you do. There's some great stuff you can make use of in this new version of GL Studio. And we're always, open to feedback for things we can add to future versions. Next question is, do I need a new license to run this version? So I think that depends on which version of GL Studio you're coming from. If you're coming just from 8.2, your existing license should be perfectly fine to use. If you're coming from a really old version, you might need to upgrade your license. Of course, you can simply email support@disti.com and they'll help you with any licensing issues that you might run into. Next question was that an Unreal application with the cockpit? So what we demonstrated was loading GL Studio content in Unity, um, but you can also load GL Studio content in Unreal as well, having built the GL Studio content using the angle deployment.
Yeah. And on the slide, we did have a picture of some GL Studio displays in an Unreal application. So on the slides, we did have that. Yep.
Yes, this is an Unreal environment for this demo that we're showing. Another question is, when copying content from one project to another, can it also pass the class properties over? Yes, so you can copy any of the code items from one project to another, the properties being one of those that you can copy over. If that is maybe not what exactly you were asking, feel free to put a follow-up reply there. Looks like there are no questions at this time, but I'll give you another chance. Um, Give it like 30 seconds since there is that delay. Someone asked, can we integrate with Microsoft Flight Sim as well using Angle? Justin, do you have any idea about that one?
Yeah, I would say yes, it's possible. We're actually wrapping up a plugin for Lockheed Martin's prepared software, which I believe is like a branch off of Microsoft Flight Sim, and we have that running, and I believe we may publish that soon. So I will say yes, that is possible. I mean, I don't know exactly how similar they are, but should be possible.
All right. Any other questions? We'll give just a little bit more time here for those. Another question we have. I have GeoStudio open but can't find the package manager to install the Angle package. Do I need to install additional software? So the reason that you would not be seeing the package manager is if you're not actually working in a GeoStudio project. So if I go, let's actually just open a new instance of GeoStudio. You see, when I initially open GeoStudio, I'm not going to see that um, Manage Packages button. You're going to first have to create a new project by going to New Project up here, selecting your bundle, giving it a name and location, and clicking Create. Once you do that, you'll see the Packages button. Final comment we had was thank you. Yes, and thank you for watching. Hope that this presentation was helpful for you to learn something new about what's new and improved with GeoStudio. It looks like we do not have any further questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Just to reiterate, if you go to docs.disti.com, you can download GeoStudio 8.3 today. And if you have any questions as you're moving along there with GeoStudio, don't hesitate to reach out to our support team by emailing support@disti.com. Thanks again. Have a great day.